Hello there everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to another Should You Pull video for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Now today we're going to be talking about a classic light versus dark storyline here, as we're going to be celebrating the release of Golbez, his rework, LD and brand new burst weapon, but also talking about Divine Alexander and the Lufenia that comes along with that, including a pretty peculiar strategy that a lot of people employed in the JP side of things that may well be nerfed for us, but could still possibly work. So if you'd like to learn more about Golbez, about the banner that also features the return of Hope and his LD, and Divine Alexander, then of course stay tuned and keep on watching. Now before we get started, of course, don't forget to check out all of my social media links in the description box below, including Twitter, Twitch, Discord and Patreon. Of course, I stream 5 times a week now, so it would be lovely to see lots of you come down and see me like farming a bit of Divine Alexander come Friday, taking on the Lufenia. I haven't decided whether I'm going to throw some tickets at Golbez yet, because my luck's not it was doing okay for a while and then it just dive bombed again, so I don't know how I'm going to go about this one. But I may well throw some tickets at Golbez, even though I know a lot of other people really like him. And speaking of which, when it comes to Patreon, I always shout out one of my patrons every time I release a video, and today that person is going to be Martin Sittic, who, much like Winged Paragon in my last video, is a massive Golbez fan, as you can see through their title card. So if you'd like your favourite character being associated with you within a title card and put in the credits at the end of my videos, as well as other things such as voice chats we all do, and being a part of Would You Pull, all sorts of other benefits, then perhaps you'd like to consider becoming a patron yourself. And a massive thank you goes out to Martin Sittic and all of my other patrons as well. Don't forget to check out all of the other resources that are out there for Dissidia. That are all linked to the description box below, and of course all the other content creators out there other than myself. Right, so before anything else, obviously let's take a look at the banners and what's on them, and let's take a look at Hope and Golbez, although we're not going to take too much of a look at Hope, because nothing's actually really changed for him, except for, well, nothing really, and I've already made a video where Should You Pull for Hope back then, and I think a lot of that stuff is still relevant now, so perhaps you might like to go and have a look at that. But going into the banners themselves, the first one, which features Hope, will feature Hope's entire kit, so his LD, his EX, etc., only Golbez's burst, and then it'll also have Vivi and Thancred EX on there. And then the second banner, which features Golbez, features all of Golbez's kit, so burst, LD, EX, etc., and will also feature Laguna and Shadow EX on there. Now, as I said, I'm not going to go too heavily into Hope or anything, but I do think that Hope is a character that is pulled primarily for their call ability. His LD call ability is up there with the best of them, and since I already had him from the first time around, I can skip this banner quite safely. But it's a call that I use very regularly, and a lot of players do. But the actual LD itself is also quite good, and Hope in general has one of the more unique mechanics in the game, in that he can extend character buffs. So this works very well with characters like Alize, for example, who have a buff that they revolve around but only lasts for a very short period of time. So, I mean, Alize is quite old now, but the example's still there. And as a kit in general, Hope is very just defensive support. That is what he does. He puts up Shell and Protect. He's got auras that are very strong, though, that do everything. And honestly, I think if you've managed to live without Hope up until this point, you can probably continue to do so. That being said, though, those call abilities are really, really nice, because when he comes in and does his Shell or his Purification, he actually does extend the buffs of characters that are there, so you can use him as a call ability for that, on top of the fact that D-Shell is really powerful. Like, the D-Shell debuff you get from his LD is magic resist down, so it's a damage type resist down, as well as a brave damage increase by 20%. It's just good. It is just good. I'd say, though, that because of how potent the banners are in the second half of this month, you should be taking any opportunity you can in order to save. So I certainly wouldn't go into gems on this banner. If you have a surplus of tickets and you've already picked up Golbez, or you don't particularly care about Golbez, then I think that Hope is a worthwhile investment, at least for a minor investment, because of the amount of times you'll probably find you use his call ability. And he does get High Armor Plus as well, which we'll talk about as well. His High Armor Plus is party-wide, which is fantastic. If you don't know much about High Armor Plus or anything like that, then he has the support keystone off of his regular High Armor. And then what you get from giving him ingots, books, etc. is that he basically increases the party HP and bravery damage limits. I wouldn't invest into Hope for this though, even though it is party-wide, because you don't generally use Hope in your main party. Like, it's cool to have. I wouldn't go like crazy for it. This is the only new thing Hope actually gets, and it's not something I would go chasing after. Okay, so now let's talk about Golbez. Now, Golbez is a damage dealer for dark damage. We'll get that out of the way first things first. But he has had a rework, and also I have to like, girl, like, that costume is everything. I really, really like that costume. Now, as somebody who is like, who likes Golbez but isn't a huge like stan for him, I really like him. I really like this costume. I think it's very, very cool. But more about the actual rest of his kit. If you haven't used Golbez before, Golbez is just a dark damage dealer. He does a lot more when he hits for weakness damage. He has Imperil for dark. He hits for dark, but he hits really, really hard. Now, going into the rework and the stuff that he's had from this, he's had extra skill uses on both of his skills. Rising Wave was typically his single target damage attack, and basically you leveled up his Shadow Dragon buff every time you used one of his skills, provided you had at least one copy of it, which you would have gotten by having his EX and having his kit. And it basically made it so once you got to Shadow Dragon 3, which is the highest it can be, you'd get extra attacks on top of the Shadow Dragon because the Shadow Dragon would follow it up. Now, Rising Wave is the single target one, and then Glare Hand is the AoE one. However, it's changed ever so slightly because Rising Wave now does like 20% splash damage on top of everything else. The buffs that you got from him originally, you used to get max bravery from one, attack from the other. Now they're now consolidated into one and called Clad in Black. And then Rising Wave now does 3 HP attacks rather than the 2 it originally did. So it does hit significantly harder, and combined with a lot of his other stuff like his LD, certain buffs, things like that, it hits really, really hard. But it is still locked to dark damage. All of his damage is dark damage. Now, Glare Hand is his AoE one, and originally the Dark Imperil had to come from his EX, which was Twin Meteor. But now you can get it from Glare Hand as well. You also get 2 extra additional hits on this, and it just hits harder, and you get a AoE HP attack before you then do the attack, so you get extra HP attacks off of this as well. And then his EX was, his EX Twin Meteor was literally just 3 Brave HP dumps that hit really hard, inflicted the Dark Imperils, but the problem he always had before is that because his EX is quite slow charging, you'd then have to use his other skills to then ramp it back up again, and there's a chance that his Imperil could run out. But that's now no longer the case because of his the Glare Hand extension. Now going into his LD. Now, his LD adds a lot. So, Black Fang is a quadruple damage attack after his LD boards. It's a quadruple damage attack. You get the buffs that you would have gotten from this, like, when you enter the field, and you get 4 uses of this. So, what is Black Fang exactly? Well, first things first, you actually get the Dark Resist down off of this. You instantly max out your Shadow Dragon using it, and you also get the Black Fang buff. Now, Black Fang itself is just an HP damage buff by 10%, and you get a refund on bravery damage on any HP damage you deal. Obviously, because he has multiple HP dumps, what happens is that you get the refund at the end of that. And then what you get from it is weird, because it doesn't buff Black Fang, it buffs Shadow Dragon, which is a permanent thing for him, and so therefore it's always on. Now, he gets a lot of attack out of it, as many characters do with their LDs, particularly damage dealers. And Black Fang lasts for 9 turns. Shadow Dragon 3, while it's active, he takes 60% less bravery and HP damage, which is actually very relevant because as a selfish damage dealer, he needs to protect himself as best he can. And now that he gains bravery back as well after he's done the damage, then that's really nice. And the unique thing with the Shadow Dragon buff you get from the LD is that you gain more bravery than damage you deal as long as you're hitting for weakness damage. So, for example, I'm hitting 10,000 hit on bravery to my enemy. Instead of them taking 10,000 damage, I gain 10,000 bravery. They take 10,000 damage, I gain 12,000 bravery. So given the number of hits that are present within his kit and the fact that he has multiple HP dumps, this is actually very, very strong if you're within the right parameters to do it, because you have to be hitting weakness damage in order to get this. In order to get a lot of the stuff that you get from Golbez, he has to be hitting dark, weak damage. He also gets a stronger version of his bravery and HP+, where his HP+ becomes a a double Brave HP attack, which is fantastic. Like 3 hit Brave HP followed by 2 hit Brave HP, and then 4 hit Brave followed by 3 hit Brave if you're inclined to use the Brave Plus. He's also a mixed damage dealer. So he has some of his stuff is magic, and then the Shadow Dragon's attacks are melee. So Golbez is really powerful before we go into his burst and everything, of course. However, there's a lot of things that kind of circumvent him. Like, if an enemy is not weak to dark, Golbez just isn't very good, like, being honest. Like, Golbez has to fight things that are weak to him, or at least neutral so that he can inflict the imperil and get that weakness damage. Now, going forward, there are, after his synergy, a lot of events that absorb dark. Now, don't take this to mean that the Golbez is unusable, because he most certainly isn't. No, Cecil had a lot of Holy Absorb events after he came out. Lightning had a lot of Thunder Absorb after she came out. It doesn't mean that Golbez is unusable. However, by the time those events have come out, the chances are you probably will have gotten new toys that you'd rather play with than Golbez. But Golbez's damage, because of the massive amounts of HP dumps, the extra 20% gain on Bravery, the refund Bravery, the Dark Imperil enchant on its own, the massive potencies on all of his stuff, it adds up to a lot of damage. Now, his burst, however, I think is very interesting. It's an AoE, like, full HP damage attack to start with. And the burst effect is really odd because it affects the enemy in a similar way to how, like, Sephiroth's did. But what it does is it freezes bravery values. So if you've ever used Setzer, you know what this is all about. The enemies can't gain bravery while this is active. And in certain fights, this can absolutely ruin some enemy mechanics. Like, absolutely destroy them. And obviously with Divine Alexander, like, I'll get to him in a moment, but, like, he gains bravery a lot, and therefore, like, freezing their bravery value with a burst effect that's attached to him means that even if they're immune to things like freeze, they're not going to be able to get around this. But it only lasts for 4 turns, and it's attached to a burst effect, which means you're only going to get to use it once. However, like, we do know that he is getting a burst plus, so we know when that's coming, so that might be appealing to you as well. But even when his burst plus came out, like, Golbez is good, there's just a lot of other characters that draw focus rather than him. And I think that if you are a fan of Golbez, you will not be disappointed in him. But I think that the biggest issue that Golbez has as, like, in terms of me recommending him to pull for him, is that he's sandwiched between 2 very, very, very powerful characters. Namely Garland and then Bartz at the latter half of the month. But unfortunately, by the time that Bartz comes around, Golbez's banners will have left, so you can't even try to do it that way. Golbez is really, really powerful. Like, his damage is astronomical, and his burst phase does a lot of damage. If you can set up things correctly for his burst phase, it does a lot of damage, and you do get a really nice thing at the end of it. He provides nothing to the party outside of Dark Imperil, which very few characters can take advantage of. He is straight, neat damage. That is all he does. He doesn't do any shenanigans with turns like Lightning or Garland, or Terror or anything like that. He just hits really hard. So if that appeals to you and you don't mind the fact that there are certain events that he's just not going to be able to participate in, then go for him, because he is very fun. He's very linear, but he gets the job done very efficiently, just not all the time. Now, in terms of call abilities and high armor, call abilities for Golbez are meh, honestly. Like, unless you're using them on another dark damage dealer, which realistically, if you're using a dark damage dealer, it's gonna be Golbez. But he does, like, half-decent damage, I guess, through all of his stuff. Like, Black Fang will still deal a lot of damage. It's still a 4-hit, like, 4 HP dump, AoE Brave HP. It still hits hard. And the call effect is that you get Brave Refund after you've hit for things. Which is nice, but ultimately, if you're using Golbez, you'll be using it in your party, because you'll only be using Golbez because you're against something that's weak to dark, and therefore you'll be using him anyway. So I wouldn't go pulling for him based on his call abilities. And then for high armor, like, he is a selfish damage dealer, and he has the attack keystone on his regular Lufenia armor, but so therefore it makes sense that he's just able to increase his bravery and HP damage limits. Now, the nice thing here is that with high armor, the variables are how much it increases the bravery or the HP damage limits. So he does a lot more bravery damage after he does this, so he can hit for up to 15k with no other kind of enhancements from anyone else, which is really good considering how much he gains from that, and it's going to make his HP attacks that much stronger. and he can gain have up to 125k HP damage after he, like, therefore, you know, the held bravery damage, if you will. It's good. It is good. And if you plan on using Golbez a lot, then yeah, I guess you could go for this. I personally wouldn't, though, because I don't think that it's wise to spend all of your Lufenia, like, books and things like that on armor the first day they come out. My suggestion would be to wait until you have a firmer, unless you know you want Golbez, at which point you don't need me to tell you. But if you're not sure, my recommendation would be to hold off until you have a firmer grasp on what the CP210 Armor Plus does for each character. Maybe wait until there's a bit of a wider variety. Bartz and Tifa are both going to be very, very strong candidates for this. Maybe wait for a little while and see if you need it. Like, if you don't need it, then don't go for it. So now that we've discussed Golbez and Hope and all of the banner stuff, let's talk about Divine Alexander. Now, with Alexander himself, the farming thing is something we've seen plenty of times before. So if you've got the synergy-based characters that you can take to farming Divine Alexander to get all of those juicy rewards out of it, then be sure to have a look at the banners themselves if you need any of the characters from that in order to finish it. Vivi being a part of it does actually make a big difference as well, because obviously we have his LD where JP didn't have it previously, so if you've got him handy, then that's a nice thing to have in terms of farming the actual mission. Now, with regards to the Lufenia mission, Alexander is a bit weird. Basically, what you're wanting to do with Alexander is you want to make sure your bravery damage is breaking him rather than aiming to deal HP damage, because what Alexander does is he has a recast gauge where once it's full, he'll gain 99k bravery, and then you have to break him before his turn comes up 3 times, because once you break him the first 2, he just gains the bravery back again, and if you don't break him 3 times within that period of time, he just insta-kills you. So you have to be at the ready with a massive amount of bravery damage, able to take down 300,000 worth of bravery, and 3 different instances. And Alexander is also immune to delay, so you can't really take advantage of things that way either. However, Garland, even though delay is a big part of his kit, still deals more than enough damage that you'd be able to go through that, particularly if you're taking a Dark Enchanter. Not that there are many of those, there's only really Xander who really works for that. In fact, Dark Enchant characters are actually very rare in general. Golbez is obviously a prime candidate for that. He is one of the few damage dealers for Dark exclusively, and because the Lufenia Orb is also Dark, you're going to want to have Dark damage somewhere in your party. Vivi does actually do Dark damage with his LD, but because it comes off of his follow-up attack, and you don't actually get that many turns with the follow-up attack, comparatively to some others, he might be a bit risky for you to take, especially considering he drains your HP, which I'll get to in a moment. You can also take Xander. If you have Xander and enchant, because he Dark enchants other characters, then you can take somebody like Terra or Garland or Squall, or somebody that does a really large amount of damage in a short space of time, so that you're able to get around it that way. But you just need to be able to make sure you can break him repeatedly without taking too many turns in the interim, so that before Alexander gets his turn. Now, if you're using characters like Terra, or characters that like to take a lot of turns in a row, then you have to be extra careful, because unfortunately, if you take more than 8 turns in a row without Alexander getting one, he puts up a barrier or an aura, which makes it so that he's invulnerable until he then takes a turn. So you can't just spam LD, or burst, or summon all in one shot, so that you can just deal loads of damage. You have to actually let Alexander take turns in order for you to be able to get around it. So you're going to want a good tank and support character, and this is where Hope would normally come in. But you've got really good alternatives to Hope as well. Because a lot of the attacks that Alexander deals are AoE damage, then you could bring Barsh along here. You've also got access to Aerith, who you can use to just keep your bravery high, prevent any debuffs that you get, because there is a follow-up attack that comes after the recast attack from Alexander that if your HP is not max afterwards, then it does 3 turns of delay, and if it breaks or hits somebody broken, it also inflicts a guaranteed blind and confuse, which means that your characters are completely out of action for that turn. So balance is the mechanic when it comes to this. You just need to be able to deal a very large amount of damage in a very short space of time. So being able to bring a character like Golbez, like Garland, characters that can just hit really hard, you should be absolutely fine. But there are lots and lots of clears. I'm actually going to link a video by xiiiRiley that was posted over on the JP side quite a while ago, because I looked at this video and I thought it was executed very, very well, and I'd love to see this creator get more support as well. So I'd leave a link in the description box for that. There is, however, another method that you can take to deal with Alexander, and it involves Gladiolus. So basically, Alexander has another mechanic, again kind of fitting in with the whole balance theme, that if your party's bravery is capped out, he counterattacks you by doing 100% gravity and wiping your bravery back down to 0. This is so that you're like relying on actually dealing bravery damage rather than brave gains and then hitting. It doesn't work against Alexander, unfortunately. However, this triggers Gladio's attack, Gladio's counterattack from his LD. Now, if Gladio can cap out the bravery of your party because he batteries with that attack, then obviously it triggers Alexander again, which then triggers Gladio again, and then you will end up with an infinite loop that literally just kills Alexander instantly. Now, this was nerfed in the JP version to make it harder to do, but it didn't mean it was impossible. And again, I will leave a little video in the description box below showcasing some of this stuff, but you can use Gladio if you can make sure that you're going to cap out on bravery every time you get the counterattack. The nerf is that you get a 30% brave gain reduction from the start of the fight. So you need to bring everything you've got in order to increase bravery damage, HP damage, so Cecil's going to be an absolute must here. If you've got Gabranth or Aerith or anything that will increase HP damage, bravery damage, make it so that Gladio will cap out. You may end up actually even having to reduce max bravery passives, or even equipping like a really terrible weapon on everyone but Gladio, so that he's guaranteed to cap out the damage. If you can guarantee that, then you can instantly win the fight. But it's a lot harder to do. You need very specific things in order to be able to do it compared to how JP had it back then. But if you don't have access to dark damage, it's a way around it. So now, of course, we come to the big question of the video. Should you be pulling on either of the Alexander banners? And honestly, I think this one is a hard one, because I know there's a lot of really big fans of Golbez out there. Like, I've literally listed 2 of them in my Patreon cards these past couple of videos. But Golbez is a character that just does one thing, which is damage. But he's got a very narrow focus on what he can do with that damage. If you're in the right situation for him where he can deal weakness damage, he will go off. Like, damage, HP dumps everywhere, the extra gains on bravery that are currently unique to him. He just gets a lot of damage in, and he will hit extremely hard. His burst effect is also quite cool in that there are certain events where they'll have entire phases where they just can't do anything. You could just sit there and go, yeah, come at me. And you could like pair him up with like a trap character, and they can't gain bravery, so they're just taking damage from you. And it just works really nicely. But if there are any reason why enemies like hard resist magic or physical or dark damage, you literally just can't take Golbez to them, because he just suffers so badly from them. And I'm talking like magic resist in the sense that there are certain events, we saw this in DE Transcendence as well, where there are enemies that gain magic resist and it doesn't matter if they're imperiled. Events like that, Golbez is going to really struggle with. And he is very linear. Like, he's just going to do damage. He doesn't provide any party like buffs for you. He doesn't do anything else for the party. He's just your primary damage dealer. So honestly, I think if you are going to go for him, you will probably want his burst at some point, just because if you're taking him, and you're taking him without a burst, and you want a burst in your party, you're then going to be relying on a support-based one like Ishtola or Firion or Warrior of Light, etc. And most people tend to like taking like a damage or DPT style burst along with them. With Hope, if you missed out on him the first time, and you've seen like either myself or any other content creator or other players that have used Hope's call ability a lot, but I've used Hope's call ability a lot. I've actually used Hope quite a lot, to be fair. I didn't think I would, but I've used him quite a lot even. He's still relevant. Like, he is still good. I think if you've lived without him up until now, you can live without him. You can continue to live without him. But I think if you're lacking in like strong call ability debuffs, Hope kind of has you covered on many bases. He heals everybody. He extends buffs. He puts up defensive buffs like Protect and Shell. The D-Shell debuff is really strong. Like, it's an Imperil and it's 20% like bravery damage percentile on top of that. It adds up, and it's just generally a very powerful consolidated debuff. So I think that he is relevant and he could well be worthy of your tickets. I would not, however, gem Hope. The reason for that is because if you are low on resources, I would honestly suggest you skip every one of Golbez's banners. Every single one of them. Purely because Bartz's batch is too good to miss out on. Like, Bartz is amazing, Galoof is amazing, Tifa is amazing. That's 3 big banners, and if you're low on resources, then you're going to want to save up for those instead. Golbez is by no means a bad character. He's not. He's really good. He just kind of needs a little bit of finesse to, like, and you know, you can work around him with just his LD. He is fine with just his LD, and I'll probably throw a few tickets at it to try and get that, but that's based on the fact that I really want Kadaj later on, and if I get Golbez's burst, I'll be happy about it then. And the fact that he's a 2-week synergy character is obviously going to provide a lot of, like, sort of alleviation for a lot of players. He's on a defined summon board, so you're going to be able to get a lot of resources out of him. So, honestly, this one is an entirely up to you kind of basis. Like, if you were to pull for Golbez, I don't think you'd be disappointed in him. However, you might be disappointed in the fact that when certain events come around, particularly after his synergy ends, you're going to come across Dark Absorb a lot. And it hits him a bit harder than it has done for other characters in the past. So then, of course, finally it's time for Would You Pull, the section of the video where you, the viewer, get your chance to let everyone else know whether you would or wouldn't pull on any given banner and give your reasons as to why. So, as always, massive thank you goes out to all of my patrons for casting their votes, leaving their comments, etc. It's massively helpful to everyone else to let everyone know that it's not just my opinions that factor into these things, and it's nice to see people that disagree with me as well. Now, like I said earlier, there's a lot of Golbez fans in my Patreon. Like, there's quite a lot of Golbez fans, and it kind of shows in with regards to the numbers here, because 24% of people said that they're going to go in with gems here for Golbez, 41% said that they were going to use more than 100 tickets, 28% they said they were going to use less than 100 tickets, and only 7% of people said no. Now, I think a lot of this as well is based on the fact that Divine Alexander comes out at the same time. Now, he is going to be a very efficient farmer for Divine Alexander. We're going to get a lot of resources from it. I'm of the opinion that I will probably spend some, but I will try my hardest to show some self-control, which I've not categorically been the best at in the last few months, but maybe the game will give me a break, who knows. But I'd like Golbez LD because I do think he's really cool. The costume is to die for, and I would like him, but I'm not going to cry over it if I don't get him. But going into some of the comments, Cobalt Zork said, Golbez is yet another one I've skipped on before because he always arrives at the wrong time, resource-wise. Here we are again. Faris and Ignis weren't quite nice enough to me to warrant going in big for Golbez, but we're getting lots of tickets with Alexander, and I won't be using any gems in Bartz's batch, so I can afford to spend a few here. First of all, I'm shocked at not spending any gems in Bartz's batch. Like, I hope you get lucky with your tickets on that one, because there's a lot of really strong stuff there. But this goes to show that look, not everyone is pulling as hard as you might think on some of these big banners. But I think that you're absolutely right in that he's just wrong time, wrong place. He's sandwiched between such powerful characters, and it's really unfortunate. But because there are a lot of people who love him, and I just hope that like I said, my biggest piece of advice is go ahead and pull for him, but not so much that it would impede your later progress. Martin Siddick says, I want to say that I'll just use tickets because that's smart, but Golbez is my favourite character and his costume is on point. I'm so conflicted, just like the older brother. We'll use more than 100 tickets and maybe a few gems. Bartz and Cloud of Darkness are must-have, so I guess I just have to get lucky. You're pretty much in the same position as me then, really. Like, I really want it, but I know I don't need it, but he's really cool, and I want it, but Bart and Cloud of Darkness, and oh god, I can't spend my resources on everything, even though I've not been doing a very good job of that recently, so I absolutely feel your pain on this one, Martin. Grace the Sniper says, I really like Golbez as a character and his kit is fun. I'd like to get his LD, but I'll have to set a ticket limit at probably 200 to 250. Divine Summon will definitely be appreciated, though. Enough said, isn't it, really? Like, he's cool. He is really cool. And I'd actually really like his burst, like, mainly because I just want bursts in general. But I think the freeze effect is actually quite strong in the right situations. It's just a case of trying to figure out where I would put him, especially with so many Dark Absorb events coming afterwards. And then finally, Domo Dragoon says, Golbez is in my top 5 character to play as in Opera Omnia, and he may even still be in my top 5 used characters, even though it's been months since he was useful. I'm going to gem his LD, but I'm not going to chase the burst on any of the banners, as I already have Hope. I'm skipping that side entirely. I think a lot of people have Hope. I think a lot of it, like, because I heavily recommended him when he came around the first time around, because his call ability was so good. I think a lot of people have recommended him. So I think a lot of people, like, if you have Hope already, then it's nice to kind of get, like, to have a synergy character and not have to pull for them. That I always appreciate that. And the same goes for Golbez. The reason I said that I would quite like his burst is because knowing that he gets a burst plus, even if it's not the most special thing in the world and it's not like the massive boost he needed like some other characters have had, cough Barts, then, you know, it's a shame, but it's still nice to be able to go into a banner going, oh, I've got something new coming along. So that's going to be all for today's video. Thank you all very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below whether you plan on pulling for Golbez or Hope, or whether you're saving resources for Bart's and the gauntlet of banners that's going to follow him. And of course, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications on any future videos I might be making. And come check me out on Twitch as well, where I stream 5 days a week, including every event that goes live for Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia. Thank you all very much again for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.